Hey everyone, welcome back in here to Game Night, and welcome back into the MGN Studios. Nate Schreier back with you here. Whether you're watching during our Bennett Center Farmers Insurance Agency, Centennial Securities halftime show, or just on YouTube based on what game or where you may have found this piece. A chance here as we've made our way to the final week of the season to do a little bit of a playoff picture look as we head into the final week of the year. Things honestly in West Michigan pretty solidified in a lot of cases, but let's take a look at some of the things we're looking for both in the games that we've got this weekend at MGN and of course also around the area as a whole. Of course, huge thank you to snoozestew.com along with goosepoop.io. Those are kind of the main two tools I and so many others use in terms of looking at how are things going to be grouped and mapped, and we're going to look at Snooze's website in just a second for just that, as well as looking at the projections of if this team wins, if that team wins, what exactly are things going to look like, and spreads and predictions in that way as well from Goose Poop. So we thank those guys for all of their work that helps us sometimes try to look a little bit smarter on game night and elsewhere in the media. They do the real heavy lifting for us. And with that, like I said, we're going to take a look here at snoozestew.com. First off, note here as well, as you can see I've done here, make sure you click on, I was talking to Snooze about this, you go to the interactive map portion of this. It's where you can get a little bit better looking map options. So we begin here in Division 1, and I think in D1 things are going to be pretty straightforward, and it's going to in large part come down to Jenison. By the way, Snooze's website also has an option to be able to look at the team list and where things are at in that regard and how things are aligned, and that's where you see Jenison. That's going to be a talking point that we're going to touch upon here in just 1 second, because this is how things align at the moment. Grandville going to Hudsonville, East Kentwood, and Rockford. But if you throw Jenison into the mix, that then, of course, is going to put another team in the playoff mix that you're going to have to contend with. And in that case, where things get seeded, you can expect to see East Kentwood go east. Jenison fits into Region 1. So very likely, and that is making a probably decent assumption that Jenison wins that game against Grand Haven this week. You're going to see Jenison wind up the 4 seed. They will be the team going to Hudsonville, and you likely will have Grandville going to the TED to take on Rockford. It seems to be a little bit of an annual tradition. D2, a game or a division that has a little bit of interest if you are watching the Grandville Caledonia game, and that's where things are really interesting because right now, as you can clearly see, no Muskegon, reigning state champions, no Caledonia, who, of course, were in the state title game in Division 1 a couple years ago. And just kind of a funky thing, both of those teams right now, playoff points-wise, would be good enough to make the playoffs if they played in Division 1. But they are both out, and honestly, both comfortably out. I think Muskegon, they take on Cincinnati Moeller, one of the best teams in Cincinnati. They're in trouble pretty much regardless, I think, this week. Caledonia might be in trouble regardless, too. It's going to be really tough for them, even with a win, if you take a look at the Goose Poop projections, if they are able to beat Grandville. But regardless, Caledonia will need a win against Grandville, and all these D2 teams are all, for the most part, centered right in that same district. And my goodness, what a district that'll be. Byron Center, Northview, Mona Shores, all grouped together right now. When you're talking about where MGN might be, if we aren't doing Grandville games, and we're going to have a little bit to talk about in terms of where exactly we're going to be, you'll probably see us on a lot of Unity Christian coverage, but that also certainly one place that we're going to have to think about wanting to be. Division 3 gets a little bit interesting as well, and interesting, of course, in terms of looking at teams that we're covering this week. Zeeland East, Zeeland West, both right now in their own district and also in their own region in terms of these other teams. The main district to watch is District 2, as you have Forest Hills Central, Coopersville, Kenowa Hills, who of course just beat Coopersville, East Grand Rapids, who just beat Catholic Central. They're all grouped together in a really interesting one, but once again, potentially looking at a situation like last year where it wound up being FHC versus Zeeland West for a trip to Ford Field in the state semis. We could have that set up again, and a potentially interesting and good little draw here for Cedar Springs as they're going to get to kind of be in their own district. Some good teams, of course, coming north that, it's tough to always fully grasp onto what they're going to be, but that could be interesting to look at it as well, the way things are falling heading into this final week of the year. And honestly, once again, all pretty straightforward. I think in D3 and the way things are going to look, it's kind of been a straightforward year in that way. On the whole, probably more of a straightforward year than we've had for the last couple of seasons. In Division 4, this is where I think you're going to find us, Chandler and I, spending a lot of our time this playoff run. We did the Unity Christian playoff run in 2021. That was a ton of fun, and they could likely be doing it again. They get to start with their big rematch against South Christian. We'll see what Carson Viss and company have going. South Christian in a position, they have to play Catholic Central to close their season, but I think even with a loss there, they'll be okay at 4-5. But likely it'll be tough for them to climb. We'll see how things fall. Maybe they're going to be able to climb with a win this week into the third spot, which would be really big for them to avoid Unity Christian. But Unity Christian potentially in good position in terms of other MSR broadcast teams. Remember, Freeland and Lou Gamelin do have a Freeland broadcast every week on MGN. So keep an eye on that, potentially, at least in terms of Ford Field, for if Freeland and Unity match up. That's a one scenario where MGN would not have the coverage of Unity Christian State Championship game. But you can kind of look at it. Hamilton right now set to go south to Paw Paw. In a prior week with snooze, with the way things that fell, Hamilton was playing Holland Christian, so it could be an interesting rivalry matchup if things wind up falling that way again. This is all really up in the air. Forest Hills Eastern right now in their own region as well as they're getting to stack things up. Taking a look at Division 5, and of course everyone is going to have their eye on one thing when it comes to West Michigan teams, and that is Catholic Central, West Catholic. We're seeing West Catholic as they take on Zeeland West this week. You can see playoff points, 55-53. It's close there, and this final week of the year, especially playing against a really good D3 opponent, could be very, very critical for West Catholic if they are going to have a chance to jump into a 1 seed and maybe being able to host that game against Catholic Central. That's the biggest thing, I think, in this Thursday night game that is up for grabs for West Catholic. Not a ton up for grabs on Thursday night for Zeeland West in the grand scheme of things playoff-wise, but West Catholic still a chance based on the way things fall to possibly be able to move up in those playoff rankings a little bit and be able to potentially get a home game against Catholic Central for that huge potential district championship game that would be following that. So that's a look at kind of the top 5 divisions at least, and a look around West Michigan. Thanks, of course, like I said, snoozeju.com, goosepoop.io for all of their work. Make sure you check out those sites. I'm sure I'm not the first one to tell you about those sites, but make sure you check them out. And make sure you stay tuned at MI Game Night. As you can see above me on social media for where we're going to be for the playoff run. We're still TBD on what our Grandville potential coverage looks like, but I can tell you right now, if Grandville's playing at Rockford or if Grandville is playing at Hudsonville, we're going to have our Rockford and our Hudsonville teams most likely, especially Rockford for sure, and also looks like Hudsonville on the coverage of those games. So likely we would not pick up a Grandville coverage point until into if they're able to win a district championship, unfortunately. So therefore, look at Unity Christian, look at Division 2 and other places that Chandler and I may wind up being as kind of where things are looking right now in terms of our playoff picture. All right, that'll do it. Thanks as always to the Bennett Center Agency along with Centennial Securities for presenting Game Night on Michigan Sports Radio and MichiganGameNight.com. And we will be right back here on MGN.